The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the show. Joining us on the phone is Mark Potok, the director of the Southern Poverty Law Center. They've, of course, just recently released their newest list of 18 anti-gay hate groups and also have their very popular hate map if you want to see a visual representation of where the hate is across the country. Hey, Mark, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
What trends are you seeing in hate groups? I mean, is the trend towards the political, the anti-gay, racism, Barack Obama being in office certainly must have affected it. What are you seeing right now?
Well, I would say in the biggest picture, what we've seen over the last couple of years is a really remarkable, and at least in my experience, unprecedented kind of explosion in the radical right in general. And that goes fairly across the board. That means, we've seen a huge increase in the number of so-called patriot groups or militia groups. But at the same time, a very steep rise in sort of more traditional hate groups, Klan and neo-Nazi groups and so on, and also the extreme nativist groups, the anti-immigration groups like various Minutemen formations. And this, I think, is clearly related really to three main factors, I would say. I would say the number one driver of all of this is the changing demographics of this country, the changing racial makeup of this country.
We've been talking for a couple of years now about the increase in the right-wing terrorism or violence that we've been seeing and how I believe it is underreported in the media. And, we've been getting the same criticism that if you do a basic Google search about your group, you receive, which is that the reason we're seeing that is because you and I are looking only for right-wing terror and are choosing to avoid so-called left-wing terror. I mean, can you address that? Does the SPLC want to only expose this type of stuff on the right?
I think it's I think it's you're really suggesting. I mean, it's a ridiculous criticism. There is, there are a few scraps of kind of a radical left out there. Mainly in the form of kind of animal rights extremists and people who burn down SUV dealerships and blow up laboratories where they do animal testing and that sort of thing.
The Discovery Center guy, for example.
Yeah, but I mean this is tiny. The number of people involved in that are very, very small. And at the end of the day, although they certainly will one of these days, they have never killed anyone at all. One single person in recent years on the radical right in this country, Tim McVeigh, murdered 168 people at one fell swoop, and enormous numbers of others. I mean, I know 30 or 40 different plots from the right in the last 15 years of people who tried to kill 1,000 people, 5,000 people, in one case 30,000 people in Texas. So, without suggesting that, animal rights extremists should be ignored and are totally meaningless, the size and threat posed by that movement is really infinitesimal compared to what we're seeing on the radical right.
You were on with Chris Matthews and Tony Perkins recently, and I watched that with great interest. And, of course, Tony Perkins denied the alleged hate group status of the Family Research Council, and he is one of those 18 groups on your list. How do you define a hate group, first of all, I think is the best way to start?
Well, it's not a, let me say, as a general matter, hate groups are groups which say in their platform statements, on their websites, in the writings or speeches of their leaders, that an entire group of human beings, based on their class characteristics, are somehow less. So at least our evaluation of hate groups has nothing to do with criminality or some kind of estimate we're making of their potential for violence. It's
right.
If you say all white people are blue-eyed devils or all black people are wicked criminals or whatever it may be, that's hate group status for us. In the case of the religious right groups that we wrote about in the last issue, we're really looking at the specific sort of defamation of gay people, gays and lesbians. And so in those cases, we got a little more specific with our criteria and said, our main basis for listing these groups, let me say, first of all, what it isn't. We do not list religious right-wing groups, religious groups of any kind, because they think that the Bible says that homosexuality is a sin, or that they think that homosexuality is not okay. That's a religious belief, and it's sort of, one can argue one way or another about what the Bible says or doesn't say, or the Quran.
So
or the Torah.
that alone would not get them on your list?
That wouldn't even get them close. I
Okay.
mean, we wouldn't even look at a group for that.
Yeah.
And, many millions of people believe that, and who's to say? Our thinking on this, though, is that if a group uses repeatedly and knowingly as well falsehoods to attack and defame people, that really does qualify them. So, when you look at something like the Family Research Council, I mean, one of the worst things they do, have done and continue to do to this day, is to associate gay men with pedophilia.
Right.
And this is, probably the biggest charge that's made by the extreme anti-gay right in this country. It's been made going all the way back to Anita Bryant some 30 years ago in Florida. But, the reality is that since Anita Bryant was around, there's been a great deal of real scientific work done, scholarly work done, and it's simply a falsehood. Gay men, homosexual men do not molest children at any higher rates at all than heterosexual men. So it's a complete falsehood, and yet, when I was up against Perkins on this show, he hauled out a bogus study, and at the very end of the show, tried to, he said, you're full of it. Mark needs to go back and do more research, he said. And then they went on to cite something called the American College of Pediatricians, which he said had definitively shown that, homosexuals were dangerous, gay people were dangerous to children.
And that's a complete sham group, which their name itself is actually meant to sound like a legitimate counterpart which supports gay rights and the reality.
That's right. It's a fake job. I mean, Perkins rather cleverly did this at the very last moment of the show. I mean, we were out of time, so no response was possible. Well, the reality is that this group is a faux group it's a breakaway group from the real professional association of pediatricians in this country, which is called the American Academy of Pediatrics, not the American College of Pediatricians.
Right.
The American Academy is 60,000 serious pediatricians. The American College is between 1 and 200 people who specifically broke away from the larger professional body because the larger body said there is nothing wrong, there are no bad effects from gay parenting, same-sex couple parenting, or foster parenting. So, as a matter of fact, this group has, as a condition of membership, you have to believe that foster parenting by gay parents is a very bad thing.
Right.
So, in other words, it's a complete fake. It's like, an energy company that sets up a fake environmental group to say, we've done the research and there is no global warming. It has nothing to do with it.
It's funny. I just finished reading Wendell Potter's new book, Deadly Spin, and he details the creation of these front groups paid for through a PR agency by the companies that have an interest in that being the public opinion. It's identical.
That's right. And this wasn't, at least to my knowledge, set up by any big funder or anything like that. But, the point is these groups are created. I mean, we see it in the immigration world as well.
Sure.
They create organizations that are presented as think tanks, but they don't do much thinking in these think tanks. There are groups, think tanks, the so-called think tanks, that put out study after study after study after study on the evils of immigration. But there is no study on, any possible benefit of immigration. And, so it's very similar. We have a group here that we can cite that sounds authoritative, and I don't doubt that many hundreds of thousands of people who were watching me and Perkins debate thought, Tony Perkins had ended the argument, right? With his scientific citations.
Hey, in the last minute we have left here, you're personally being demonized. Everything from Jewish Mark Potok is out to attack white Americans through the SPLC and everything else under the sun. What do you make of the fact that increasingly those who seek to expose hate are actually becoming the focus of the attack?
Well, what can you do? I mean, it very much goes with the territory. I will tell you that, we live in a building, we work in a building that has, more security than the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. I mean, it's really quite amazing. So, in fact, this has been our life for some time. I mean, 1983, the Klan burned our building to the ground.
Yeah.
So, now it's coming from more quote-unquote mainstream groups, but they don't seem to be terribly swift about it. I mean, I see some of the religious right-wing groups are saying they're going to take away all our government funding, which would be a terrible thing, except that we have never accepted and won't accept government funding So I guess that's not going to be a terribly effective counterattack on their part.
I should say, we've been speaking with Mark Potok, director of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today.
And thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
All right, let's take a break, Louis. We'll be back. We'll talk about the latest connections between rhetoric and real-life violence and plenty more. Stay tuned.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show is made possible by listeners like you and by Greenfield Savings Bank, building strong communities one account at a time, with offices in Greenfield, Amherst, Conway, Shelburne Falls, South Deerfield, and Turners Falls, and online at greenfieldsavings.com. By the Daily Hampshire Gazette and GazetteNet.com, connecting our communities with local news and information. By DIF Design, specializing in custom business websites at difdesign.com. Find out more about underwriting The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.